Welcome to Clarity, a podcast powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. I'm Zach Warren, the Institute's Technology and Innovation Insights lead. In each episode, we dive deep into a single question from decision makers and thought leaders from legal, corporate, tax accounting and audit, and government communities. In today's episode, we discuss the big question: what are the ways organizations should approach AI adoption to maximize its value? Take a look around the business world and it's clear that AI, generative AI, and increasingly agentic AI have made inroads to professionals' daily lives. But it's one thing to use an AI tool, it's wholly another to maximize its impact on the organization. Some organizations have started to make that leap, but it's happening in fits and starts, with lots of trial and error, and perhaps less strategic planning around the rollout than expected. Recently, Thomson Reuters released the third version of its Future of Professionals report to dive into how AI and other big trends will impact the future of work. And it's clear that organizations today have to bridge the technology of today and the business of tomorrow. In today's look into the future of professionals and more, Mike Abbott, head of the Thomson Reuters Institute, interviews Steve Hasker, Thomson Reuters president and CEO, about what the future may hold.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Abbott. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Clarity, a Thomson Reuters Institute podcast. Very glad to have you joining us. Also very pleased to welcome Steve Hasker, Thomson Reuters president and CEO. Today we'll be discussing the latest third iteration of the Future Professionals report. Talk a little bit about how the changes in the industry are impacting their professions and their organizations. Steve, welcome back. It's great to have you joining us again.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here and good to see you again.
Absolutely. Just for a little bit of context, for 3 years, we've been surveying professionals to determine the impact of current change, recent change on their organizations and how they're adapting to that change. This year, we surveyed just shy of 2,300 professionals from around the globe across legal, risk, compliance, tax, accounting, audit, trade, and the government. Little broader survey results this year. Again, global expansion. So we've got a lot of good insights. Steve, I want to kind of jump right into this. Our research showed that professionals are being impacted from surging volumes of data to geopolitical turbulence, complex regulatory and legislative demands. All of these are impacting them in some capacity and pretty substantially in some cases. They're expected to work faster. They're expected to work to higher standards. This year's report found that 80% believe AI will have a high or even a transformational impact on their profession within the next 5 years. And I think 5 is probably overstating it. But only 38% of them feel like that transformation is going to happen over the next year. Now, I'm not even going to ask you this as a question because I've heard you talk about this and I know your feelings on this. But I really would like to have you talk a little bit about what you think leaders should be concerned about as it relates to that gap.
Yeah, so we're at an interesting point, Mike, I think, in history. And just to put it in perspective, and I'll do this because I think the Future Professionals latest iteration reinforces the following point, which is the AI-driven transformation of professional services and professions within corporations will be bigger than the internet, than mobile, social, or cloud. So many of us have lived through those disruptions and those tech-driven innovations, and we've seen the sort of short, medium, long-term effects of those. In our view, the AI transformation, starting with sort of ChatGPT and its rise 2 and a bit years ago, is going to drive a bigger set of transformations and impacts across professional services. So the gap you talk about, where 80% of folks surveyed believe that AI will have a high or transformational impact on their professions within 5 years, but only 22% say their organization has an AI strategy. I think that gap is particularly acute, and it's particularly important to bridge for a couple of different reasons. The first is, as with many disruptive technologies, there is a learning curve. And for the professionals and the companies and the professional services firms that get up that learning curve, they're going to be hard to catch. And they're going to be hard to catch in terms of their understanding of the technology, their application of the technology, their ability to attract talent. So a firm that sort of stays on the sidelines will be less able to attract young talent than one that goes up that curve rapidly. They're going to enjoy different cost structures, which makes them fiercely difficult to compete with. And then lastly, they're going to be able to introduce new lines of business based on the technology. And once launched and once penetrated within their client base, they'll be hard to catch. So I think there's a number of reasons, Mike, why that gap is worrisome for the firms that don't adopt AI relative to those that do.
Yeah. There's a couple of things you mentioned that I want to get back to a little bit later here. But I am curious what steps you think organizations should be taking to truly maximize their return on their AI investment. I mean, to your point, they've got the resources in place, but yet 38% feel like it's only really going to benefit them in the next year. Like, what are those steps in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that the leadership need to establish a clear strategy. So they enable create the space for the organization to invest in the right technologies and ensure that their people are using those technologies safely and effectively, that they're measuring goals, and that they're then able to provide a feedback loop around the adoption and deployment of the technologies. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the firms that have a visible AI strategy are 3.5 times likely to experience some form of ROI against that strategy. And then beyond that, leadership of firms need to lead by example and have governance aligned to that vision. So in order to ensure that data privacy and protection is preserved, that firm or client intellectual capital doesn't leak out into the a broader set of users of these tools. So I think having a strategy, firstly. Secondly, enabling and driving usage of the tools within their organizations. And then thirdly, having the right governance. All of those things are critically important in this new environment.
It stops and starts with talent, obviously, and we hear a lot about the implications on talent. I think sometimes it's skewed one way versus the other, and I've heard you talk about both the positive and potential, not even negative, just change implications for talent. But the one that stands out to me, and this is probably a little over a year ago, but you talked about the tax profession and how that could actually be a benefit to them in terms of just making it a little bit more of an exciting profession for some with the mundane work. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, just in talent generally. What are these implications?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's true to say, Mike, that top talent is drawn to innovative workplaces. And I think this will resonate, right? When the most talented graduates, the most talented people who are coming from competitors and other walks of life will, as part of their interview process, ask the question, what technologies do you have? What technologies will I be able to use if I join your firm? And so for firms that sit on the sidelines and don't deploy the best technologies, they're not going to be able to answer that question to the satisfaction of the highest potential talent. So I think that's the first one. The second, for existing employees, if you don't put the best tools in front of them, their view will be that the firm is not investing in them, and that there's a risk of declining employee engagement. So in other words, just having folks continue to do the same work over and over again. And then thirdly, to your point, in tax and accounting, what we see is a critical shortage of talent. So the number of tax returns goes up, the complexity of those returns goes up, the number of audits goes up, the complexity of those audits goes up. And yet the number of graduates coming out of undergraduate and graduate programs and becoming CPAs has very, very markedly declined over the last 5 to 10 years. So in other words, there's not enough people to do the work and to meet the client's demands. And so the technology has to play a role. So you can see I think an optimistic scenario here, which is a very realistic scenario, that tax and accounting professionals are able to use technology to make them significantly more productive, and, as you said, to reduce the mundane, repetitive work and allow them to focus on value added for clients. And so it ought to be a situation where the productivity of the profession fundamentally rises, the talent shortages are overcome, and that employee satisfaction goes up. And I know that sounds like nirvana, but I think that's what we're sitting on the cusp of here.
It does make sense, and I think that message gets lost sometimes in all the doom and gloom scenarios that we hear about on a daily basis. There's absolutely a theme to our discussion here so far, and it's really about adoption. There's a pretty significant gap between innovators and laggards in the data that we saw. And I'm just curious, through your conversations with business leaders, with clients and customers and others, um, how do you see that evolving from where we are today, the pace of adoption and the extent of that adoption as well from where we sit today?
Yeah, we're in an interesting moment, Mike, because I think it's very hard to find a managing partner of a professional services firm or a CEO or CTO who isn't talking about the adoption of generative AI, agentic AI tools. So I think everyone's come to the conclusion that they're going to need to do something. But if you sort of peel that back a little bit, what you actually find is that there is 20 to 30% of firms that are going aggressively and really sort of adopting a curious mindset, making investments, trialing tools, rolling them out across different practice areas. And then there is, I would say, the other sort of 70 to 80% of firms that are putting a toe in the water, but not much more. And so, that I think will shift. I think we'll see, in a year or two, a majority of firms is really pushing forward here. But at the moment, you have a relatively small subset of firms that are looking to establish leadership positions, and I think the rest that are looking to establish followership positions. And as we talked about, that followership position really does bring with it some risks in terms of attractiveness of talent, development of new revenue streams, cost structures, and therefore competitiveness.
Great. The data also shows us tells us that 96% of those that were surveyed or interviewed said that they have at least a basic awareness of AI capabilities. But a number of them said they have no idea how to apply it to their day-to-day work yet. Instead, if they're playing around with it at all, it's some really kind of basic, summarize some emails or whatever those types of functions would be. I'd like to get your thoughts in terms of how individuals and organizations can make themselves better at getting up to speed. But I'd like to focus on, we try not to make this about Thomson Reuters, we make it about the report. But I also think the way that you and your leadership team have brought the educational resources, the tools to TR, and encourage and expect usage and familiarity to grow by use of those tools. I'd like to hear a little bit about the importance of that, but also what you think other organizations can and should be doing, including the individuals themselves.
Yeah, so we see the sort of most effective way to get up this curve in terms of knowledge and comfort with AI is a multifaceted approach. So specifically blending formal training, which obviously employers need to provide, with hands-on experimentation, collaboration, and a real mindset of adaptability and curiosity. So employers need to say, okay, what are the formal training modules that we need to put in front of our employees, and how do we create incentives for them to go through that training? How do we create then the availability of tools for them to perform hands-on experimentation, to start playing around with the tools, and then allow them collaborative settings to learn from each other? And then, it's been the case for forever, which is the more curious a company is, the more adaptable it is, the more open it is to learning, often the better it performs. I mean, one piece of advice that Jane Barrett had for our folks some time ago, who were sort of asking her, she runs AI strategy for Reuters, and a number of people were asking her, Jane, any advice for sort of how we become accustomed to this and comfortable with these technologies? And I thought her answer was interesting. She said, pick a topic that you are passionate about and or have real expertise in. Use one or more of these chatbots to have a conversation around that topic. And she said the reason to do that is that it will teach you where these tools are very powerful and where they can be additive to your expertise. And it will also teach you where these tools are limited and what some of the constraints might be, because you'll be a pretty good judge in and around the various areas in that topic. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it, because obviously a topic that people are passionate about is easier to delve into than one that they're not. And it does just have allow people to get more and more comfortable with the tools.
Yeah, no, that's very good guidance too. And I look from a Thomson Reuters employee perspective too. If you can't get yourself up to speed and access the educational piece of it or the tools themselves, it's on you, because I mean we've been given every opportunity to do that, and I think it's fantastic. As we kind of wind this down, Steve, I'm thinking you've covered a lot of ground here so far. Are there 2 or 3 key items from the report that stand out to you more than others? I know we've touched on several already, but
Yeah, Mike, I think 3 things really jump out. I think the first thing is that the future, the AI-driven future, isn't just about whether organizations adopt AI in some way, shape, or form, but how strategically they do so, how they align it back to their business goals, back to their sources of competitive advantage. And therefore, intentional AI adoption is the defining factor for maximizing benefits. That's first. Second, organizations that move quickly to establish new roles and rethink the old roles will be better able to hire the sort of versatile, tech-savvy, curious professionals that will be increasingly needed for success in this environment. And then thirdly, when you translate this to individuals, proactively enhancing AI proficiency is no longer optional. It's incumbent upon all of us, no matter what our role is, to develop a personal strategy for AI literacy. And failing to do so really brings a risk of struggling to remain relevant and effective. So for me, Mike, those are the 3 takeaways from this year's Future Professionals research.
Sure. Well, listen, to close us out with you, I was going to ask you, if you look down the road 5 years, what do you think is going to be the most significant area of change in the way that professionals work? But with the pace of change, I don't think it's 5 years. I mean, let's just say if you're looking down the road 2+ years, what do you think it's going to be?
Mike, I think professionals that don't use AI will be replaced by professionals that do, pure and simple. And obviously that's pretty hard edged, but I think that's the reality, firstly. And secondly, I think the disparity between winners and losers in terms of organizations that win in this environment and grow and enjoy cost and scale advantages versus those that don't, that will widen. So you'll have a smaller number of bigger winners and a larger number of those who fall behind.
Very well said. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you haven't had a chance to do so already, please take the opportunity to download the 2025 Future Professionals Report. And Steve, thank you very much. Good to be with you again. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Steve and Mike, for your insights. And as Steve noted, the rise of AI isn't just a question of technology. This will mean changes for talent and careers, for skills development and training, and a rapidly increasing pace of technology adoption that will change how business decisions are made. The future is bright, to be sure, but getting there requires understanding the technologies of today to achieve the best outcomes for tomorrow. Thank you as always for joining us for Clarity, powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. You can follow or subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to share with your colleagues and leave a 5-star review. For more data-driven analysis of today's professional services market and in-depth conversations with industry thought leaders, please visit us online at thomsonreuters.com/institute and follow us on LinkedIn under the Thomson Reuters Institute. Clarity is a production of Thomson Reuters, copyright Thomson Reuters 2025.